Hello, welcome. Uh, Sorry I can't be there with you all today. Uh, if you're in C block, insert here a friendly joke about Ulrich's pronunciation of the word hotel. If you're in G block, insert here a friendly question about how Suneri's New Year's resolution is going. All right. It's been a while since I've done this Zoom thing. Brings back kind of fond memories, actually. Uh, cool. Well, I want to talk to you a little bit about outlining for your ARC paper. For the next 3 weeks, we're going to be working on writing, drafting the ARC paper. This week, we're working on an outline, and then the next 2 weeks, we'll work on drafting. This will be largely in-class work, but it may also take some homework, some thinking about it outside of class as well. So this week outline, your outline is going to be due at the end of Thursday night, like before school on Friday, I guess. And then on Friday, you're going to do some peer workshopping of your outline. So today I want to talk to you a little bit about uh, how to begin thinking about what kind of structure you might use for a paper as long and as complex as the ARC paper. Today, I'll give you a little presentation about some stuff to think about, and you'll start working with that in class. And then tomorrow or Wednesday, depending on which block you're in, hopefully I'll be back and I'll have a handout for you about more outlining strategies and techniques. But if I'm not back yet, I'll have whoever is kind enough to hang out with you in my stead hand out that handout as well. And yeah, I think that's it. How about we jump into the ARC outlining presentation? All right, cool. So, ARC nitty-gritty ideas to paper. If you want to return to your big mind map brainstorm, you are welcome to do so. Those should be available for you to access. If you want to do some more big paper brainstorming on the back of that, you totally can. Ms. Wilbon might still have the big roll of paper if somebody really wanted to get new paper. I'm sure she could maybe help out if y'all are in my classroom. Cool. So we're going to think today about how to go from that big mind map stuff that you have and your overall thesis statement that you're working on to take that into an outline with specific sections or chunks for your ARC paper. Begin with some things that we already know, but we should keep in mind. You all have learned a lot about your authors between the biographical, world, historical, cultural research, the stuff that you've read and reread and closely analyzed, written by your author, some of the literary criticism, secondary sources that you've got. You've learned a lot of stuff. A lot of that stuff is written down in note cards and in notes and stuff like that, but a lot of it is just stuff that you've kind of ambiently internalized and carry with you. So we're going to bring all of that knowledge to bear in the ARC paper. Another thing you already know is how to write analytical essays. We haven't done it together in a while, not since trimester 1, but you've written one or two before. You wrote some in 10th grade, and it's so forth. So you've already done the kind of thing that we're working towards. This is just at a larger scale than probably most of you have worked at before, but it's the same basic concept. So we're going to work on an outline this week, as I said. You might, as you're working on your outline, realize that there's some stuff that you don't know that you need to know. That's okay. Make note of it somewhere and then forget about it for this week. In the next 2-3 weeks while we're drafting, revising, etc., there will be time to do more research, time to fill in some of those gaps in knowledge. For now, we just want to work to start getting our ideas out on the page, thinking about the overall big picture and structure of the paper. So we're going to start thinking structurally. You're going to think about your thesis statement that you wrote a draft of. You might want to refine that as you work on your outline this week. we're going to think about what kinds of chunks you can write your ARC paper in. Could call them sections if you want to be fancy about it, but we can call them chunks. So how you choose the structure of your paper, and a handout that I'll give tomorrow or Wednesday, depending on which block you're in. We'll get into more detail about this, but the chunks, the organizational scheme that you want to use for this paper should be specific to your author and to what you know about your author and their work. So for some of you, it might make the most sense to have different chunks for different themes of your author's work. For some of you, it might make sense to have different chunks for specific critical lenses you want to use, or different works that the author has written, or different stylistic or literary elements or something like that. There are many ways to choose to go about this, but you're going to bring to bear what you already know and think about your author's work. So I'm going to give an example here. I hope my face in the screen share is not blocking any relevant information, but I don't know how to control that. So once again, the ARC prompt is, what were the driving forces of your writer's life? How are those influences manifested in their work? And of what value or use or merit are your author's works for a reading audience today? So kind of three interconnected parts there. So let's look at a kind of example. Margaret Atwood, she's a Canadian poet and novelist. At least some of you will probably read a novel by her next year, if you haven't already. She's one of my favorite authors. So I started out my mind map here. This is actually Miss Crouch's mind map, I believe. She has moderately better handwriting than me, so we're just gonna go with the materials that she already made. So in my sample, Ms. Crouch's sample mind map here, we start with the really basic stuff. We've got our author, Margaret Atwood, some stuff that we've learned about her. We know that she's heavily influenced by feminism, and themes of feminism show up in her work. So that might be a good critical lens through which to read her work. We've got some historical biographical stuff about her. She was raised in the Canadian woods. She attended Harvard. She's become like wildly known as a dystopian author. Her book, The Handmaid's Tale, got made into a Hulu show, etc. So then kind of two different sorts of dystopia that she's written, I found out if I was researching her. One would be dystopian writing about the role of women in society. So The Handmaid's Tale would be the book that talks mostly about gender roles. And then she's got some dystopias about scientific and environmental climate stuff. Oryx and Crake is one of those novels. I think that's actually a duology or a trilogy now. So we've got our basic kind of stuff here. Then we want to go ahead and get more specific, fill it in with more subtopics and sub-ideas. So, my face again. When I think about what feminism means in Margaret Atwood's life and her work, and kind of some of the historical context, the Equal Rights Amendment is a major kind of public policy shift during her lifetime. The specific relationships she's had with people have influenced her perspectives on gender and feminism. And then issues of reproductive rights. I know that shows up in her novel, The Handmaid's Tale, and also obviously she was alive when Roe v. Wade was determined, and now she's alive when Roe v. Wade has been repealed. So kind of major feminist stuff going on in her life and in her work. And I just kind of fill these in. So Ms. Crouch has here in blue, these are the big main topics. I don't know if Margaret Atwood, the center bubble, is like a main topic. Right? It is the topic for the paper, but I don't know if you need to circle it. But anyway, then she's got red circles for kind of the subtopics, and then subtopics, or like more detailed information that she wants to get into, maybe in this paper, circled in black. So when we've got Margaret Atwood, dystopian women, there's a few different things that show up. One is the novel The Handmaid's Tale and specific stuff that's going on in that novel. One is her use of language in her writing, which is one of the themes of Handmaid's Tale, but also we might see in her poetry as well. And then the idea of women's value being in their reproductive potential, their fertility, is one of the dystopian things that she focuses on, both in The Handmaid's Tale and in this other novel, Oryx and Crake, and in some of her poetry as well. So we've got kind of You see some dashed dotted lines here. We've got some interconnections between the different kind of sections or things that we want to focus on. And you'll probably find that with your author. It's not that they treat one theme in one poem and then another theme in another poem and another theme in another poem, and that's it, and they're all totally separate. It's probably going to be some overlap, some interconnection between their different works. Cool. So then we take that kind of information we have and build out a little bit of an outline. Maybe in the first section of my paper, an introduction, I want to talk about the historical and biographical context that she's writing in. All of these materials that Miss Crouch made say that you can have a whole section or chunk of your paper focusing purely on historical and biographical context. I think that's risky because the goal of your ARC paper is for you to make an argument, for you to like put forward your own unique position about your author's works. And it can be sometimes hard to have your own unique argument about their biography or about just facts. So we don't want that historical biographical section to just recite facts about the author or their time period. We want to integrate it into our thesis, the arguments that we're putting forward, etc. So then you just see on the left-hand column of this slide, Ms. Crouch took some of the main themes or topics that she was focusing on and made each of them a chunk or a section of the ARC with a few kind of subpoints that go into each section. One thing to note, we're not doing a paragraph by paragraph outline this week. We're doing a chunk by chunk outline because you're not going to know how long these chunks should be, how many paragraphs they should be, until you actually get into the writing of it, the meat of the analysis. So you might, end up writing 3 paragraphs about feminism in your author's work and find out that you don't really have much more to say. Or you might write 3 and you're like, wow, these 3 paragraphs are huge. They have multiple points in each one. Actually, maybe I need to break them down and spend a little bit more time getting into the details here. Maybe this is like a big section of my paper. So to repeat, we're not going over paragraphs just yet. We're just thinking about section by section, chunk by chunk. So then bringing the thesis into it, or maybe kind of looking at the different chunks you have and thinking about how your proto thesis that you've come up with might be refined or revised. We've got here influenced by her isolated but scientific upbringing and her formative experiences with the women's rights movement in the late 60s. So that's 2 historical biographical contexts. Margaret Atwood's literary works remain powerful warnings against complacency regarding women's rights, the manipulation of language, and the necessity of science. So that's 3 kind of themes, and each of those themes is a thing that this paper is arguing makes her work still powerful, still relevant to us today, even though she was writing, between 30 years ago and 5 years ago, depending on what works you're looking at. It's interesting that her thoughts on women's rights, the manipulation of language, and the necessity of science are still kind of present with us today. So that would be an argument that the paper is creating. Finally, this is the last thing I want to cover today, is once you kind of start to have your chunks figured out and you're refining your thesis statement, you turned in a proto thesis already. As you revise that, refine it because you're thinking more about what sections you want in your paper and what you want to focus on. There should be 3 components to your thesis statement because of the ARC prompt that asks you to think about the influences on your author, how those manifest in your author's work, and why is that relevant today. You want all 3 of those pieces in the thesis statement. So this thesis statement, you can even color code if you see green, blue, and purple in this thesis statement. We've got the context, scientific upbringing, women's rights movement. We've got the author and her works, Margaret Atwood's literary works. We've got relevance or impact today. I would say that I would want to see more blue, more author and works, or like how the stuff shows up in their works in a thesis statement. This is a fine 1-sentence thesis statement. And if you have a thesis statement like this, at the end of this week when you turn in your outline, that's legit. I support that. But for the ARC paper, as you get into the drafting over the next few weeks and stuff, I'd want to see this thesis statement kind of get more detailed. What exactly are you noticing about Margaret Atwood's literary works that speak to these experiences she's had and that speak to the themes you're naming? So I think whenever you can connect literary elements, style, and stuff like that with themes, you're making a more complex, more layered argument that ultimately seems to me more compelling. We can work towards it. This is a goal. Stop sharing my screen. Oh gosh, I hope I've been recording this whole time. That would be something. Pause, stop. Okay, yeah, cool. All right. So that's, I think, all that I have for you today. In terms of lectures. So you should use the remaining class time to begin thinking about your ARC outline. Again, if you feel like there's still older work that you need to catch up on, research you need to fill in, there will be time for that. But we do want to have an outline done by the end of Thursday. You're going to peer workshop it on Friday. So making sure that you're thinking about what sections or chunks, what themes, what critical lenses, what literary styles and devices, etc., what specific works you want to look at, and how those might serve as chunks or sections of your paper. So by the end of the next couple days, you should have an idea of what sections you have, and then we can fill in kind of more of the details, the subtopics, topic sentences, and stuff like that come Wednesday, Thursday, etc. Cool. If you have any questions, email me. I'm around. Um, yeah, I think that's about all. I hope you're all doing well, and I hope to see you very soon. Thank you.